Christopher Thomas Knight, born December 7, 1965, also known as the North Pond Hermit, is an American hermit who claimed to have lived without human contact, with two very brief exceptions, for 27 years between 1986 and 2013 in the North Pond area of Maine's Belgrade Lakes. During his seclusion, Knight lived within 1 mile, 2 kilometers, of summer cabins in a crude camp he built in a well-drained woodland obscured within a cluster of glacial erratic boulders. Having entered the woods with almost no possessions, he set up a camp composed entirely of items stolen from nearby cabins and camps he also pilfered from a local family's dairy farm adjacent to where he camped. He survived by committing around 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area, at a rate of roughly 40 per year, to be able to survive during the harsh winters of Maine. Apart from the fear and notoriety his many burglaries created in the local area, Knight's unusual life also attracted widespread international media reports upon his capture. Journalist Michael Finkel wrote an in-depth story about the incident for GQ and later wrote a book titled The Stranger in the Woods: The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit. Christopher Thomas Knight was born in Maine in 1965 and graduated from Lawrence High School in Fairfield, Maine after completing an electronics course at Sylvania Technical School. Knight took a job installing home alarms in Waltham, Massachusetts. In 1986, Knight abandoned his job and took a road trip throughout the South before abruptly driving back up to Maine. Stopping only when his car ran out of gas at only 20 years old, he entered the woods, saying goodbye to no one. His parents never reported him missing to the police. In an interview, Knight said, "I had good parents, and we're not emotionally bleeding all over each other. We're not touchy-feely. Stoicism is expected." At the time of his notoriety, neighbors who lived near Knight's childhood home reported that for 14 years, they had exchanged no more than a few words with Knight's mother. Over the next 3 years, Knight changed the location of his camp sporadically out of fear of being caught, settling outside the North Pond Lakes in 1989. Knight survived the bitterly cold Maine winters, with temperatures regularly falling below 0 F, 18°C, by waking up during the coldest part of the night and pacing his camp until warm. He regularly took cold sponge baths, shaved, and cut his hair, in part to avoid suspicion in the event he was spotted by others. He avoided building wood fires, whose smoke might reveal the location of his camp, and relied on a propane camp stove to cook and melt snow for drinking and bathing. After stealing propane cylinders, he transported them in canoes borrowed from vacant camps. He quietly paddled along the shadowy shoreline in the pre-dawn hours to avoid being silhouetted on open water. Knight concealed thefts by sprinkling pine needles over the used canoes when he returned them to make them appear undisturbed. He stockpiled supplies to remain in his camp from November to March to avoid revealing his location by footprints on snow-covered ground. A few residents interviewed by the Boston Globe have expressed doubt at Knight's outdoor survival skills, saying he might have broken into and taken refuge in vacant cabins. At the time of his arrest, Knight claimed that only one time during his 27 years of solitude did he speak with another human. At some point in the 1990s, he exchanged the word hi with a hiker whom he encountered on a lightly traveled path. In the summer of 2012, Knight broke into a cabin where a man was sleeping. There was no car in the driveway, so Knight thought the building was empty. Neither man saw the other, but the man in the cabin shouted, "Get the hell out of here," after which Knight ran out. Knight reportedly never returned to that particular cabin. Biographer Michael Finkel later reported that around February 2013, a fisherman named Tony Belavance, along with his son and grandson, discovered Knight in his camp 2 months before he was apprehended by police. Knight later admitted to having been discovered by the fisherman, but did not mention it to police at the time of his arrest, because the group swore a pact not to tell anyone of their meeting. After the anglers learned that Knight simply wanted to be left alone. Knight was captured by Game Warden Sergeant Terry Hughes on April 4, 2013, while burgling the Pine Tree Camp in Rome, Maine. Hughes had been determined to capture Knight and worked with the camp to install hidden motion detectors which would alert him to trespassers. He was sentenced to 7 months in jail on October 28, 2013, of which he had already served all but a week while awaiting sentencing. In addition to the jail sentence, Knight paid $2,000 in restitution to victims, completed a co-occurring disorders court program designed for people with substance abuse problems and mental health disorders, and completed 3 years of probation. Knight has described deep-felt ethical misgivings about the burglaries committed, saying that stealing is wrong. Even the prosecutor said a longer sentence would have been cruel. Judge Nancy Mills believes that Knight was unlikely to reoffend. After release, Knight met with the judge every week, avoided alcohol, and secured a job with his brother. Journalist Michael Finkel met with Knight for 9 one-hour sessions while he was in jail. This was the genesis for first an article in GQ in August 2014, and then the book The Stranger in the Woods, published in March 2017. Knight was largely reluctant to express any inkling of motives or insights gained through his experience, but he did offer, "Solitude bestows an increase in something valuable, my perception. But when I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no audience, no one to perform for. To put it romantically, I was completely free." Finkel compared this observation to similar statements by Ralph Waldo Emerson, Charles de Foucauld, and Thomas Merton. Knight, however, resented being compared to Henry David Thoreau, instead calling him a dilettante because Thoreau lived for only 2 years in his Walden Pond cabin and his mother did his laundry, saying he was just a show-off who went out there and wrote a book saying, "Look how great I am." As of 2019, Knight lived a quiet life in rural Maine.